All right, we are live. Going to talk a little bit about Delta's new flight policy with service dogs and a couple of other things. So to start out, while people are coming in and joining, I am going to read a article from CBS News, published January 19th, regarding the new Delta Airlines policy. And it goes as follows. Soon, Delta Airlines will require additional documentation for passengers taking service animals with them on flights. This comes amid an increase of incidents involving animals, including a dog attack last year. Starting March 1st, customers will have to show proof of health or vaccinations for their animals 48 hours in advance, I would assume in advance of their flight. In addition, owners of emotional support animals will need to sign a statement confirming their animal can behave. However, the new requirements don't apply to pets that stay in kennels during flights. Delta's new rules are aimed at two different types of animals. The first are service animals, which receive specific training to help blind or disabled passengers. Then there are emotional support animals, which require no training at all. Both fly for free and are not required to be caged during flight. Federal regulators have interpreted a 1986 access to travel law to allow support animals in airplane cabins and in apartment buildings that do not allow pets. But some people use untrained pets in order to get them on the plane for free, especially since it's easy to go online to buy vests or ID cards with a service animal insignia. Delta said the idea behind the new regulations is to keep trained service animals and emotional support animals safe from aggressive ones. Overall, the airline says it carries 700 service or support animals every day. But people have tried to fly with everything from turkeys to snakes, spiders, and even sugar gliders. Since 2016, the company reported an 86% increase in animal incidents that includes animals urinating, biting, or showing acts of aggression. Last June, a 70-pound dog flying in as a support animal bit another passenger several times in the face on a Delta plane. The victim was hospitalized. According to CBS News correspondent Don Dollar, Tom Panic, CEO of Guiding Eyes for the Blind, was on a Delta flight recently, made miserable by a misbehaving support dog. For 2.5 hours, passengers had to tolerate this dog while it was barking, lunging, and disrupting flight, Panic said. No one wanted to confront this individual and say that the dog is not appropriate as an emotional support dog. It might seem like a harmless way to travel with your pet, but Panic says there are serious repercussions. It profoundly affects us because the next time we go into a restaurant, they may tell me, no, you don't have access here. And I wouldn't be able to take 3 steps without Gus. 19 states have laws against calling untrained dogs service dogs. Arizona is considering legislation to become the 20th. All right. Excuse me. So let's dive into this new ruling from Delta. Let's dive into the whole situation. First of all, it's important to understand that on board an aircraft, the ADA does not apply. The Air Carriers Access Act applies. The Air Carriers Access Act does not follow the same rules as the ADA. It's similar. However, it draws a difference between psychological service dogs, under which the post-traumatic stress disorder service dog is considered one of, and other types of service dogs. So a mobility dog, they would not ask any questions. They would just say, okay, that's your service dog. However, if you say this is my PTSD service dog, then they're going to say that's an ESA, because the ACAA, the Air Carriers Access Act, lumps PTSD service dogs or psychological service dogs into the same category as emotional support animals. We understand the difference that a psychological service dog is still trained to perform tasks designed to assist their handler with their disability, whereas an emotional support animal solely provides support to their disabled handler by their presence. Okay, they just make the person feel better because they're there. Both types of animals, service dogs and emotional support animals, require their handler to be disabled. Anybody who is not disabled, who is claiming their dog is an ESA or a service dog, is pretending to be disabled, and that's pretty insulting to those of us who actually are disabled and do need to use our service dogs. So, oh, I'm out of coffee and my voice is going to get scratchy. I apologize. So right off the bat, there's one of the problems is people, being people, have discovered, oh, hey, if I just claim it's my ESA, I can take my dog with me anywhere. And because they don't understand the law, they don't understand that the laws are written to protect disabled people, not pets. And so they take advantage of other people's lack of understanding of the law, and they take their dogs with them, whether their dogs are trained and well behaved or not. 99% of the time, that person who is not disabled and who has just decided to falsify their claims in order to take advantage of the law are taking animals that are not trained. Now, another part of the problem with the ACAA is that an ESA does not have to be a dog. And that's the only other law that identifies emotional support animals is the Fair Housing Act. The only requirement you have to have in order to have a doctor-recommended emotional support animal is that you have to be disabled. That's it. So your emotional support animal can be just about anything. It can be your fish. It can be a chicken. It can be a dog. It can be a cat. Those technically, because they are animals that make the disabled handler feel better when they have them in their presence, are emotional support animals. It's a real gray area. It's a difficult law. It's one that people readily and easily take advantage of, and that's unfortunate. And we're going to delve into the Fair Housing Act in a little while, but let's get back to the Air Carriers Access Act and the new policies from Delta. So Delta's policies are, again, their new policy is that 48 hours before the flight, they want you to provide a copy of your dog shot records or immunization records. They don't want you to go to the vet and get a health certificate or anything like that. Now, I used to breed Alaskan Malamutes, and I had to ship a couple of Alaskan Malamute puppies via air. And I can tell you, in order to ship the dog, the puppy, in the hold, in a crate, you have to provide, when you purchase the ticket, you have to provide a copy of a health certificate from the veterinarian that, one, outlines the dog's shots, their vaccinations, and two, guarantees that the puppy is healthy before they will put the puppy in a crate in the plane. So this is not much of a change as far as transporting a puppy or a dog via air. If the dog's going to ride in the hold, you have to provide this information anyway. And that, for that purpose of shipping a puppy or a dog in a crate in the hold, has to be within a week. That's not what they're saying. They're saying 48 hours before the flight, they want to see proof of the dog's immunizations. Okay, that's to guarantee that the dog's not going to give somebody rabies. If you are a service dog handler and you do not have your dog shot records, first of all, why not? You're not taking care of your dog. If you're not getting your dog shots, every time you go to the vet and get a checkup and they get shots, you get a record of that. If you don't have it, it's a simple phone call to the vet. Most vet offices I've dealt with can email you a copy. If they can't, most people's vets are pretty close. It's not hard to go get a copy. I carry a copy of Skeeter's latest checkup and health record in my truck with me at all times. So if there is ever a problem, I can pull out that piece of paper and show, yes, he's immunized. Yes, he's not got rabies. He's healthy. The other thing is if you're a service dog handler, you're still required to get a city or county dog license where you live, unless you live where it's not required. That is actually defined in the ADA that you do have to have your dog's license. You cannot get that license without a copy of the dog's immunization records. This isn't a hard thing. This isn't putting you through anything tougher than scanning the document and emailing it to Delta. That's it. It's not a hard problem, and quite frankly, you should have that document available to you in case something ever happened. You should have that on hand or readily available. The other thing they're asking for is if the dog is an ESA, that you sign a piece of paper guaranteeing or really transferring liability from the airline to you by signing this piece of paper guaranteeing that the dog is trained and will behave. Now, this is very smart on Delta's part, and it's not a violation of the law. All they're doing is saying, if you're going to take this animal in the cabin, then you're going to take responsibility for the animal's behavior, rather than the airlines uh, bearing the liability of it. That's a pretty smart thing, and quite frankly, I don't have a problem with it. If I was to take Skeeter on a plane, I would have no problem signing a piece of paper saying that he's very well trained and will behave himself on the plane. I don't fly with Skeeter for a couple of reasons, one of which is I can't sit in an airline seat that long anymore because I broke my back and it's just too painful. The other is because Skeeter's a big 100-pound Malamute. Where do you tuck a Malamute on an aircraft? You don't. It's easier for us to drive, even if it's all the way across the country. Plus, it's more fun to drive. But anyway, these aren't unreasonable requests by any means. There are states considering requiring you, if you're flying between states in the United States, to have your passport. Several states, I read an article about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, are getting ready to pass a law requiring passports for interstate travel in the United States. That's more of a pain in the neck. I don't know. The only time I've ever traveled out of the country was when the Navy took me there. I didn't need a passport. I don't have a passport. If I want to fly from here to New Jersey and I have to get a passport, that's some serious extra hoops to jump through. But if it's that, necessary for me to fly, I'll jump through those hoops. This is no different, and it's not that restrictive. The whole goal and aim of this is twofold. First of all, the fakers will back off. They'll stop taking their turkeys and their lizards and their snakes or whatever on the plane. That's one of the big points. Second of all, it returns personal responsibility to the person handling the dog to ensure that the dog is well behaved. And if the dog isn't well behaved, they retain the liability for that dog's behavior. I think this is a good law. I think it's going to back off the people who are just using the law, abusing the law to take their dogs with them. I think it's going to back that off. I really do, and I don't object to it in any way. I think it's not a law; it's a rule. It's Delta Airlines rule. I think it falls within the ACAA. However, we're going to talk about the difference between the ADA and the ACAA now. Now, the ADA specifically recognizes PTSD service dogs as service dogs. It recognizes psychological service dogs as service dogs. Period. We need to stop drawing lines. Is the dog task trained to assist its disabled handler with a disability? That's the question that is legal to ask. If the answer is yes, there is no what type of service dog is it. The airlines, the ACAA, I've read the law, and I'll provide a link to the law to you in the chat here. I have read this law. The law specifically prohibits airlines, same as the ADA, from asking you what your disability is. They can only ask you, are you disabled? Is that a service dog trained to perform specific tasks to assist with a disability? And what tasks is it trained to perform? They can still only ask you the same questions as the ADA. Okay, here's where the problem lies, and right now I'm gonna drop in a copy of the matrix that they use to define what type of service dog a service dog is. Okay, and this is a really long link. I apologize, but if you click on it, it opens up a PDF document that is the government's document. I hope that works. I don't think it's going to. Is the transportation.gov site's matrix. Okay, that does open up. That defines what service dogs are. And here's where I don't like the ACAA in any way, shape, or form. On the second page, they have this little grid, and it goes from Air Carrier Access Act to Department of Justice interpretation of the ADA to the FRA interpretation, which is, I'm not sure what FRA is. Anyway, so on the second page, third box down, it says psychiatric service animals are recognized as service animals, but are considered to be emotional support animals and therefore subject to the applicable regulatory requirements, for example, documentation. Whereas in the ADA, psychiatric service animals are recognized as service animals, period. You guys can't click on the link. Let me try it again straight from the link. Here's the thing, though. The ADA and the ACAA both forbid people from saying, well, what's your disability? The airlines can't say, well, what's your disability? The airlines can't say, try that link, guys. The airlines cannot say, what's the dog trained to help you with? They can only ask you, is it a dog trained to perform specific tasks to assist you? And what are those tasks? Okay? So if you don't tell the airlines that it is a PTSD dog or a psychological service dog, they don't know. If you just say it is a service dog, and they say, what tasks is it? Well, that's just weird. All right, I'll read it to you. Well, that's not going to work either because I'll read it to you. It's www.transportation.gov/sites/.gov/files/docs. This is ridiculous. I will put the link on the page. See, now I can click on it and open it right from the chat. I don't understand why it's not working. One of the vagaries of Facebook. I'll put the link on the page. I'll download the PDF file, and I'll put it in the files folder on the PTSDog group as well, so that you can read it. Okay, so back to what I was saying. Is if you don't say this is my PTSD service dog or this is my psychological service dog, they cannot ask you. If you say this is my service dog, your service dog is in fact a service dog, task trained to perform tasks to assist you with your disability, that's all they need to know. So you can use the law to avoid the problem with the law because they cannot say, well, what's your disability? So you don't have to say, I have PTSD. Okay? So then they do not lump your service dog in to the category of an ESA. And the only thing they can ask you for is your dog's shot records. Okay? It's that simple. It's that, I mean, their own law shoots the rules from Delta in the foot. And if you're on the phone letting the airlines know, because if you're disabled and you're traveling with your service dog, you still got to contact their disabled or disability, oh, good grief, what's the name of the desk? They have a disability travel assistance desk. You still have to contact them and say, I'm traveling with my service dog. They're going to ask you for the dog shot records 48 hours in advance. No big deal. Scan it, email it to them. Done. Problem solved. And they can only ask you what tasks it's trained to perform. If they say, well, what's your disability? You can say, you're violating the ACAA right now. I don't have to tell you that. And you don't. It is against the law. It's specifically expressly forbidden in the ACAA to ask what the disability is. They can say, will you need any assistance making it to the gate, such as a wheelchair or something like that? They can ask that, but they can't say, they can't ask what's your disability. So when you go to travel on a plane, don't tell them it's a PTSD service dog. Tell them it's a service dog. If it is legitimately a service dog, I'm not telling you how to fake it. I'm telling you legitimate handlers how to deal with it if you need to fly. Just tell them it is my service dog. It is trained to perform specific tasks to assist with my disability. That's all they need to know by law. You don't have to get any further into it than that. It's that simple. Do we have any questions about Delta's policy? Again, I'll get that transportation.gov doc downloaded and put it into the files in the PTSDog group so that you can read it. It's pretty eye-opening what departments of the government, how they interpret the definition of a service dog. And quite frankly, the ACAA is the most egregious interpretation by taking psychological service dogs and lumping them in as ESAs. An ESA is not task trained. We all know that. So it's pretty frustrating. But again, if you understand the law, you don't have to deal with the problem. Don't tell them what your disability is. You don't have to. You are not required by law to tell the airline, I have PTSD. It's none of their business. And that's the same thing when you're dealing with ADA questions. When you're dealing with ADA questions, you walk into a grocery store or a restaurant and you have your service dog with them, and they say, is that a service dog trained to perform specific tasks to alleviate a disability? And you answer yes, then they can only ask, what tasks is it trained to perform? And you say, blocking, cover, watch my six, medical alert. You can say any of those things, okay? You don't have to say, well, I have PTSD and he keeps me from doing this, this, and this. You don't have to get into it. You can name one task, and that's all if your dog is behaving, if your dog is doing what it's supposed to, if your dog is not creating a disruption, if it's not urinating in the or defecating in the establishment, they cannot exclude you from that establishment. I'm going to caution you here. You will run into people who have enough knowledge of the law to fake it. Again, if the dog is not causing a problem, it's not that big a deal. Okay? We handlers need to police ourselves within our community. If you are handling a service dog, you have to be disabled, or it is not a service dog. Okay? If you are not disabled, it is not a service dog. It's plain and simple. The ADA is very clear. A service dog is a dog trained to perform specific tasks for its disabled handler. Okay? If you're not disabled, it's not a service dog. So when people are faking service dogs, what they're doing is pretending they're disabled. That should be what upsets you, not the dog. It's not the dog's fault. It's the person that's the problem. Okay? And we're not going to get into a whole argument, well, you don't look like you're disabled. When people tell me that, I tell them, well, you don't look like you are either, but you must be really, really stupid for that sentence to have come out of your mouth. That's not a very nice thing to say, but you know what? Sometimes people rub me the wrong way, especially with that, you don't look like you're disabled line. Yeah, I got you. You don't look like you're disabled right here. The veteran comes out when that happens. Okay, let's talk about the Fair Housing Act. The Fair Housing Act is what governs access for service dogs and emotional support dogs in housing. Okay, there is a link to that in the files in the PTSDog group. Oh, nice one, Amanda. Amanda says she tells them they don't look like an idiot, but then they open their mouth. That's good. That's really good. Okay, Fair Housing Act. Fair Housing Act is what guarantees you access to housing if you have a service dog. It precludes the rental person renting the place to you from denying you access because you have a service dog. And that includes they cannot charge you pet fees or anything like that. There are some exceptions. If the person is a private individual who rents 4 or less units, they do not fall under that protection. However, if they use a rental management agency and they have only 1 unit, because they use a rental management agency, they do fall under the FHA protection. They are required to rent for you. They cannot deny you. They also cannot charge you pet fees because a service dog is not a pet. Okay. If they have 4 or more units, if it's an apartment complex or anything like that, they cannot deny you access to renting that place. Unless your service dog is of a breed that would significantly affect their insurance rates. A little gray area in there. In some states or cities, if an apartment complex is insured, their insurance agency can say, however, if you have these breeds, and it's always breed specific, unfortunately, you have to pay this much higher of a premium for insurance. I'm not going to name the breed. Well, name one of the breeds. Unfortunately, the Alaskan Malamute is on the top 10 bad dogs list for many insurance companies. Luckily, my insurance company, that's not the case. Skeeter doesn't cost me any extra as far as my renter's insurance because he's a Malamute. Thankfully, my insurance company is reasonable. However, Amanda, I don't know that. I'll have to do some research and find out. Amanda asked if they have to prove that they tried to get a different insurance, though. Here's the thing. With the FHA, when you go to apply for an apartment and you have a service dog, you have to request reasonable accommodation. Okay? So you are saying, I want to rent here. I have the deposit. I have, I'm ready to go. I need reasonable accommodation because I use a service dog. Okay. So then they should, if they have a rental agency, if it's a large apartment complex or whatever, they should have a form for you to fill out. They're going to ask you for a letter from a medical professional that states that you are disabled and use a service dog. Okay, it does not have to define your disability. You don't have to tell them what your disability is. It just states so-and-so person is disabled and uses a service dog. Okay? That's right, David. So you fill out their whatever their little form is. You provide them with that letter. At that point, they can only deny you if it would cause hardship and cost increases in their insurance. So if it kicks up, a 50-unit apartment complex's insurance, $30 a year, that's not a hardship. Okay, and it could get to the point where you had to battle that in court. If it kicked up a 5-unit rental insurance, their insurance, $500 a year, well, that could be considered a hardship. When you do this, when you're requesting a reasonable accommodation, you need to remember that what you're doing is requesting that this apartment complex, a house, whatever, accept that you use a service dog and that they then will break their own rules, okay? It means you can live in no pet housing. It means you can live in no pet apartments or a no pet community, okay? Yes, that's right. And if you're applying, if you are already in a housing complex or whatever, and you need to get a service dog, you have to ask for reasonable accommodation before you bring the dog into your apartment or house. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. You're again requesting reasonable accommodation. And before we go there, service dogs in training are only covered in some states, not every state. They are not covered by the ADA. Okay. So you need to understand what your state's laws are regarding service dogs. There's a link to a website that goes through each state's service dog laws and whether or not service dogs are training are protected and everything. In the files section of the PTSDog group. It is not a .gov site, however, it does reference to .gov sites. I personally have looked up a state's laws on that site and then gone through the state's laws, and as far as I've been able to discover, although that's not a .gov site, their information is accurate and it's fairly current to state laws. Okay, so you got into an apartment with your service dog. You requested reasonable accommodation, and now you want another dog. Okay, so you want a pet, and pets are prohibited, or you want a pet, but you don't want to pay the pet fees. Think about this. Your service dog, you don't have to pay pet fees for. But if you want a pet on top of your service dog, you do, because it's a pet. If you want an ESA in addition to your service dog, you again have to request reasonable accommodation. Okay? It's that simple. Don't use the law that is designed to protect you to game the system. That's not what it's there for. It's there to ensure that when you need to live in a place that doesn't that prohibits pets, that you still have an equal opportunity as everybody else to live in that place. Okay, it's not there for you to abuse. Same thing. Look, if you're in my situation where Skeeter's getting ready to retire, I'm going to have to get a puppy to start training to succeed him when he can no longer work. Were I to try to rent an apartment where I needed to bring the puppy, I would request reasonable accommodation for Skeeter. I would explain that I have a service dog in training who is going to succeed Skeeter, and I would then request reasonable accommodation for that puppy. However, it's a puppy. It is not a service dog. It is not protected by the ADA, and depending on what state I'm in, it may not be protected by the state. So if they say, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to pay a pet fee for that puppy, I'm going to, because they're not breaking the law. It's not a service dog. It's in training, and it's going to do puppy things. The other thing, by the way, the Fair Housing Act does not protect you from is damage fees if the dog does damage. If your service dog, one of Skeeter's really bad habits, and it's something that I've worked and worked and worked to break him from of, and I can't, is when he's really got to go outside, he's really excited, we're at the door, he paws the door. Well, his paws are almost as big as my hands, and he's got thick, heavy Malamute claws designed to dig into ice, so they damage the door. I'm responsible for that damage. It has nothing to do with pet fees or anything like that. My dog made the damage happen. I'm responsible for paying for it. It's that simple. I don't have a problem with that. I've worked and worked and worked to break him of it. Now, that's an ESA, Amanda, that we're looking at two different things. Amanda says she thought the Fair Housing Act covered a service dog in training, as it says assistance animals and no training is required. Remember, you got to look at the definition of a service dog and the definition of an ESA. We're looking at two different things covered by the same law. Nason Hiller asks, can a VA card showing service-connected disability be sufficient for proof of a disability for a service dog documentation, or does it have to be a letter stating that you're in need of a service dog? Nason, I believe that it has to be a letter for the request for reasonable accommodation. It has to be a letter from a medical professional. I'm remembering the wording, either a psychiatrist, a medical doctor, or a licensed, hang on, LCSW, LCSW, the licensed social worker. It has to be from one of those people saying that you are disabled and that you use a service dog. Okay? That's all it has to say. It does not have to define your disability. Licensed clinical social worker, LCSW. It does not have to define your disability. It does not have to say what task the dog performs for you. But I do not believe that your VA ID fulfills the requirements for a request for legal reasonable accommodation according to the Fair Housing Act. By the way, I got an accommodation letter when I moved here from my VA. I asked my psychiatrist. He no longer can write it according to VA policy, or at least the local VA policy. I asked my medical doctor. He no longer can write it. They both shunted it off to the LCSW who wrote it. And I explained to the licensed clinical social worker exactly what I needed. I need a letter of accommodation acknowledging that I am disabled and that I use a service dog as part of my treatment. The licensed clinical social worker wrote a letter that violates HIPAA, explaining that I have PTSD and that it says I'm disabled, then it says I have PTSD and that I use a service dog. That's neither here nor there because I don't need it. I got it just in case. But be careful when you talk to the VA about getting that letter that you explain specifically what you are needing, because otherwise they will. I mean, literally, she sent me this letter that goes into detail about my disabilities. It's not what I requested. Um, the VA is fun that way, so be careful about it. But I'll tell you right now, Nathan, most doctors at the VA won't write it. You have to go to the licensed clinical social worker. Um, and if they don't write, you know what? If they won't write it, contact the page, and we'll start making some phone calls, and we'll figure out which VA, at your VA, who's supposed to write it. There are policies in place. I have copies of some of those policies. In fact, one VA policy, the one that under orthopedics, that prescribes the process for the VA providing a service dog, is in the files section of the PTSDog group page. But no, your VA card is not adequate. It has to be a letter signed by a medical professional by law. Yes, Amanda, FHA covers ESAs, yes, but a service dog in training is not an ESA. It's a service dog in training, so it falls back to state regulations. A way around the law, and I don't like this, but you can get an ESA letter for the service dog in training. I don't like that, but it is a way to work around that law. But I'm urging you, if at all possible, not to do that, because it's gaming the system, and I'm against gaming the system. The easiest thing to do, the easiest way to handle the whole housing issue, is to be very upfront and communicate with the housing management or whoever the renter, whoever the person is who is renting the house or apartment. Just communicate. Look, I'm disabled. I use a service dog. There's my service dog. His name's Skeeter. He's been working with me for 5 years now. He's 7 years old. He trained for 2 years before I started taking him to work. Let your service dog meet the person. Let the people meet the service dog. Be a responsible professional handler. Bring the issue up right at the get-go. Ask them if they, what do they require in order to make a request for reasonable accommodation. And most of them are going to give you a deer in the headlights look and go, what? Huh? And then you're going to explain the Fair Housing Act to them. I will tell you right now, you're going to end up probably printing out the law and providing it to the housing management or whoever's renting the apartment or house or whatever. You're going to end up having to educate them, because people don't go out and look for these laws. Okay? So be prepared for that. The links are provided to the laws in the files section of the PTSDog group page. And it's, if I were to go out and try to get an apartment right now, the first thing I do is print out the FHA, print out the ADA, so that I had the law readily available to show to the person and explain, no, I'm requesting reasonable accommodation. You fall in the protected aspect of the Fair Housing Act, so you cannot deny me if I'm able to meet whatever their other requirements are for the housing. But again, don't game the system. If you have a service dog in non-pet housing or in pet-friendly housing, but you didn't have to pay deposit for it because it's a service dog, and you're protected by the FHA from having to do that, don't then take advantage of it to get another animal and claim it's an ESA or claim it's a service dog. If you want a second pet, pay the pet fees. Be reasonable. Don't use the laws to be selfish and essentially break the law. Don't do it. The law's there to protect disabled people and provide equal access to disabled people that people who are not disabled have, to provide an equal amount of access. That's what the law's there to do. It's not there for you to take advantage of because you want to be special. And that's the problem with the service dog fakers, the people who aren't disabled but who call their dog a service dog, take it everywhere, even though it's not trained, is that they want to feel special. They think that it's special for me to walk into the grocery store and go grocery shopping with my dog. I would give an arm and a leg not to need Skeeter in order to function out in society. I really would. I love Skeeter to death. I would never change a thing as far as having him. He is the greatest dog in the world. But if I could go shopping without having an immobilizing panic attack without him, I would. That's not the way it works. That's not how my disability is. I can't do those things without his assistance, without him there keeping my mind from going to those places by performing his tasks. I would trade it in an instant. I don't want to be disabled. It's not fun to have my brain do these things. But I'm going to tell you right now, it's not fun having to take a service dog everywhere because of the way the people around you behave, because of the jerks who take advantage of the vagaries, of the perceived vagaries of the laws to take their untrained pets everywhere, because of the assholes who take their untrained little yip dog ESAs and say, well, it's my service dog, when it's not. Okay? People who take these fake service dogs into public and use the ADA as a weapon to protect themselves from, and threaten lawsuits, these people are insulting those of us who need that dog's presence in order to function. That's an insult, and it's wrong. But that's our society. That's, we've got this entitlement mentality in this society. The thing that's important is, as handlers, we need to not get into that same mentality. And let's talk real quick about using a service dog. A lot of people that I want, what's it going to take for me to get a service dog? How do I get a service dog? How do I get a service dog? Let's talk about it for a minute. Using a service dog is a complete and total change in your entire lifestyle. Plain and simple. You have to change how you do everything. Right down to changing in your pajamas and going to bed. Okay? It is a complete and total change of lifestyle. I'm speaking for myself. In my case with PTSD, I was so isolated, socially isolated. I was unable to do things, normal things like go to the grocery store. I couldn't do that. I could drive, and I could drag myself through the VA. But I had panic attacks every time. I never walked out of the VA. I always ran out of the VA because I was so overwhelmed. I was at a point, heavily medicated, on the zombie drugs, not functioning, essentially rock bottom, before I decided that I was going to try a service dog. And through working with Skeeter and training Skeeter and the process, I was able to get off of the zombie drugs, start to be functional, begin to go to those places where I would panic and run before, and build up to a level of functionality. But every aspect of my life changed in the process. Everything. Now when I go out, I have to say, okay, am I going to go into Walmart? If I'm going into Walmart, do I need Skeeter's vest today? If I don't use his vest, am I prepared to deal with the questions? The law is very clear. The ADA says when it is not apparent that a dog is performing tasks to assist its handler, you may ask the two questions. So when the dog has a vest on, they're not supposed to ask, unless the dog's misbehaving, in which case they can approach you and say, hey, what's going on here? But so you have to plan that. Is it hot? Do I have water in the truck? Do I need to protect his paws? Do I have a bowl? How long am I going to be gone? Do I need to take dog food? Do I have poop bags? Do I have, some people go so far as to either carry a bag themselves or put a bag on their dog with cleanup supplies in case the dog has an accident. I'm confident enough in Skeeter and his abilities to hold it that I just carry poop bags in a cool little, I wish I could reach his leash. It's just a little pouch that clips onto the leash and has Velcro on it, and poop bags pull out of the side. So I have a roll of poop bags on his leash at all times. In fact, used it this morning. We went to Walmart to do a couple of quick errands, and he had poop. We went over to the grass. Skeeter pooped. I picked it up, threw it in the garbage. Responsible handler. That's the kind of things you're supposed to do. But you have to plan all that stuff. You have to get into a routine. Dogs are very routine oriented. Again, and part of the process, part of the healing process of using a service dog for PTSD is redeveloping that organized routine. Wake up at 7 in the morning, 6 in the morning, whatever. First thing that has to happen before I go pee, my dog goes pee. We go outside and he takes care of business before I even take care of myself. And I plan every morning. Skeeter's going to have to go out 2 or 3 times because he, just like me, just spent 8 hours knocked out of sleep and wasn't able to relieve himself. Unlike me, who can just walk into the bathroom and go, use the toilet, he's got to go outside to do it. So I've got to take him outside because I don't have a fenced yard. Feeding times, routine. Skeeter eats once a day. That's just how he is. Growing up, he ate about once a week. Weird dog. But he eats once a day. At the same time, between 4 and 5, I feed Skeeter every day. That routine is important for the dog. That routine, establishing that routine, growing into that routine, learning your dog's needs as your dog learns your needs is part of the healing process of using a PTSD service dog. It's a process. It is a process. It is not plug and play. And one of my biggest frustrations with program trained dogs is, here's your dog, here's a week of training or 2 weeks of training how to use the dog, away you go. And then the dog fails. The handler dog team fails because the handler has no idea what the dog's doing when the dog alerts. Hey, Tom, how you doing, man? It's the Iceman from down under. The dog has no idea what the person's triggers are, what the stressors are, because they didn't train together. And it's a process, and it takes years. I mean, Skeeter and we bonded immediately. And I'm a very unique case in which I had him from the day of birth. We bonded immediately. But then there was a process where we started to learn each other and learn about how each other works. And there was a process where he learned what my triggers were. He learned what the precursors, what the stressors were. And then when I realized he was responding to those stressors, I started training him to perform tasks to prevent those stressors from becoming triggers. But we learned that together. When I say Skeeter and I grew together, I mean it. We grew parallel to each other at the same time, and we grew together to work as a team. We grew together. It is a process. And at this point in our relationship and our team, I guess you could say we read each other's minds. Skeeter doesn't speak English, and I don't speak Skeeter. But we both know what each other's thinking. And, I know what that look from him means, and he knows what that tone of voice from me means. And we're able to function. We went to Walmart and grabbed 8 or 10 items today. And there were a lot of people there. Thankfully, it wasn't super stupid like it usually is at Walmart with all, oh my God, a dog, and people glomming onto it. But there were probably 6 or 7 comments, oh man, what a beautiful dog. Thank you. And I keep on going. And Skeeter was very focused, kept right on going, moving straight forward, right on task. And he was excellent. He helped me pull the cart because my back has been out for about a week now, and I trained him to do that. That's one of his tasks. He does have some mobility tasks. He's not just a PTSD dog. But it's amazing to me when it happens, what a smooth flowing machine we are. We work together. We are a team. And we carry on a continuous conversation. I give him commands. I talk to him. Hey, good job. Let's go straight ahead. We're going to turn right or left. I use the old sled dog commands: ha for left, G for right, whoa to stop. Sometimes if I'm looking and reading a package or something, I have to tell him to wait. But we have a continuous conversation. I talk to Skeeter continuously as we're working, and it's real low. I tell him good job, good dog, good job. Leave it. Big command in a grocery store is leave it. That's an important command that your dog understands. But it's a continuing conversation. It's a process. And I've found when Skeeter starts acting up, it's usually when I'm really stressed, and what he's doing is not misbehaving. He's trying to distract me by making me work him harder. Handling a dog is an active process. It is an activity. It is action. You are handling a verb, an action word, your dog. You don't just walk up in and there's a dog beside you. You're working that dog. Military working dog handlers are the same. They talk to their dogs constantly, sniff, whatever they're telling them, detect, whatever their commands are. Police dogs, same thing. Their handlers are constantly talking to them, constantly communicating. And you learn together the dog's communication back to you. And sometimes it's really frustrating when Skeeter just won't focus and just won't listen. And what I don't realize is I'm about to be triggered, and he's not disobeying me so much as he's redirecting me to him, because he's going to be squirrely because I'm too stressed, and he focuses my attention on him rather than whatever's going on around us. And I get him reset, and I refocus. It's not him that's unfocused. He knows what he's doing. But the process is for me to tell him to focus, and we look at each other, and I talk to him, and I refocus, and all of a sudden I'm working Skeeter instead of trying to deal with all the crap flying at me from around me. But at the same time, he is watching my back, even when he's being squirrely. Okay, but again, the whole process of handling a service dog, of working with a service dog, of using a service dog is life-changing. You have to change your entire life, your routine, everything. This process forces you have no other choice but to grow. Before I started training Skeeter, I blew up all the time. Had rage fits, yelling, screaming, slamming doors. That was a regular occurrence. It was a good day, the day that I didn't blow up. Okay? Dogs don't respond to that. You can't do that to a puppy. Puppies will learn fear and aggression if you do that to them. So you have to tone it down. You have no choice but to not do it. Because if you do it, instead of a dog that is confident, you get a dog who cringes and won't make eye contact. And one of the first things I learned with Skeeter is that he will not respond to that negativity. He responds to reward, to positive. And it's the same. And I had to learn, those steps, those things you read: take a breath, count to 10, step back, lower your voice. I had to learn that. Skeeter forced me to learn that. He didn't teach it to me, but I had to learn it in order to work with Skeeter when he was a puppy. Process, changing, growing. Now if I get to the point of rage, he's right here with his nose right here going, what? What's going on? Talk to me. And refocusing me. He's sitting there alerting to me and refocusing me on him. And all of a sudden that levels start to come down, that rage starts to come down, the adrenaline drops. He'll come climb into my lap and give me deep pressure therapy if it's really bad. Cortisol levels change, endorphin raises, and I'm not raging anymore. And then I'm going, why was I raging? Let's look at the situation. See, that's the other thing he taught me, or I learned it because of him. It's the other thing I learned. Let's look at the situation. Why did I start spinning up? What was it that got me to the point where Skeeter had to come say, whoa, time out, dude, back up, back off. So then I started learning how to reinterpret Rather than letting the PTSD interpret what's going on around me, start learning to reinterpret it without the PTSD, but with Skeeter as the filter, and figure out what about the situation was occurring and how I could change my behavior in order not to get to that point. Learning, growing, process. Using PTSD service dog is not a plug and play experience. There are program trained service dogs out there that essentially is plug and play, but every single handler that I have talked to who has a program dog says, after we did our little 1 week or 2 week or whatever training with the program, I was lost and had to start all over again and figure out how to do everything with this dog. I had no clue. Every one of them. 2 week training program with a fully trained service dog from a program, it doesn't work. Service dog, PTSD service dogs, it is a process through which both of you grow and learn. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up. I've only got about 4 minutes left. I've been on for an hour, but let me touch back. Again, the new Delta rules are not that egregious. They are not asking you to go to the vet with your dog 48 hours before you fly. They are asking you to provide a copy of your dog's vaccination records 48 hours in advance. And then if your dog is an ESA, to sign a document saying that the dog is trained and is going to behave. And the way to get around that, remember the ACAA lumps PTSD and psychological service dogs into the category of ESA. We know they are not, but they cannot ask you what your disability is. So if you don't tell them it's a PTSD service dog, they can't ask you if it's a PTSD service dog, and they will not put you through the signing the paper and everything. Again, make sure your dog's legit. If you're self-training especially, make sure your dog can behave. Make sure your dog is okay to handle new situations. A plane, cramped in a plane cockpit is something different than riding in the backseat of the car or even riding in a train. It's completely different. So you need to make sure that your dog is as close to 100% as it's ever going to be. But yeah, Delta rules, not a big deal. The other thing we covered, the FHA, and bottom line is, please don't game the system. You have a service dog in an apartment and you want to get a second animal, pay the pet fees. Don't try to use the law to your advantage because it worked for your service dog. Your service dog is a service dog, not a pet. If you want a pet in addition to your service dog, pay the pet fees. And then third, we were just talking about the process and growth and everything as far as using a service dog. We will be live again next week at the regularly scheduled live Q&A. I'm interested, I will say this about the Delta rulings. I am interested in how it pans out. I think that the ACAA's distinction between any other service dogs and a psychological service dog, because of this ruling, this is going to end up coming back around and biting Delta in the butt. And hopefully what it does is get the Air Carriers Access Act amended to include all service dogs as service dogs, period. Psychological service dogs are not ESAs. We know they are not ESSAs. The ACAA needs to be amended to recognize that as well. Hey, Kyle, long time no see, buddy. So until next week, hopefully we'll get some good subjects to talk about. T-shirt sales are done as far as fundraising for the book. However, the GoFundMe is still up and open. I will get that PDF document from the ACAA downloaded and uploaded into the file section so you can access it and look at the law for yourself. And then that's just the grid of who defines service dogs as what. I will also try to put a link directly to the ACAA so you can read the law for yourself into the files if I haven't already, and I'm not sure if I have or not. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your weekend, a good Sunday afternoon, And as always, if you have any questions, concerns, or need assistance, feel free to contact PTSDog. We will do everything we can to give you a hand. Have a good evening, folks.